Front door opened, as always, without a sound. Brusser Lee had this habit, entering any space without announcement, without weight, as if his feet never quite touched the ground. It was early afternoon, Culver City, September 1972, and the Los Angeles sun still heated the asphalt like embers. He had spent the morning at the studio after 2 hours of training in his own space and was returning home with his mind in the place it always settled after practice, nowhere, just present. But something was wrong. He noticed it before he saw it, a silence that wasn't the silence of peace. It was the kind of quiet that exists when someone cries softly, restrained, ashamed. Lunda was crouched on the floor on her knees in front of the sofa. Brandon was sitting there, 7 years old, shoulders curved inward, face red, hands clenched on his knees. He wasn't crying loudly anymore. He was crying in that way that hurts more, eyes wet, mouth pressed tight, trying to swallow it all down. Brusser stopped at the entrance of the living room. Lunda looked up, said nothing. He approached them, sat on the arm of the sofa next to his son, placed his hand on the boy's shoulder with lightness. "What happened?" Lunda answered before Brandon could. "He arrived like this. I picked him up from Indra's house. He was like this." Brusser looked at his son. Brandon stared at the floor. "What happened, Brandon?" The boy wiped his eyes with his fist, raised his head for a second, then lowered it again. "Nothing, Dad. I just don't want to be friends with Indra anymore, that's all." Then he got up slightly, very slightly, furrowing his left leg, and went to his room. Brusser stood watching the hallway. He noticed the slight imbalance in his stride, the careful way the boy bent his left knee to sit on the bed before closing the door. Told Lunda to leave their son alone for now, that when the time was right, he would talk to him. Dinner was ready 40 minutes later. Lunda called out. Brandon didn't respond. Brusser went to the room. The boy was lying down with a book open that he clearly wasn't reading. He stood up when his father entered, tried to walk normally, steadied his step. Brusser pulled the desk chair and sat calmly without hurry, crossed his arms. "Now it's just the two of us. Tell me what happened to that leg." Brandon's eyes widened. His expression was that of someone who thought they had hidden something well, but had concealed nothing at all. He lowered his head. "I didn't want to fight back, Dad. You always taught me that we don't use what we learn to hurt anyone." Brusser stayed quiet for a moment. There was pride there, the real kind that tightens the chest from the inside in a good way. "Tell me exactly what happened, son." Brandon told him everything. His friend Indra had a father named Damanuk. Brandon had gone to play at Indra's house with Lunda's permission. The two were playing video games when Indra, who had lost 3 times in a row, refused to pass the controller. A common argument between 7-year-old boys, the most normal thing in the world. But Indra's father appeared. Damanuk was a man built out of scale, 6'3", over 220 pounds. The kind of physique that only exists when someone decides the gym isn't a lifestyle, but an obsession. Brusser had crossed paths with him a few times at school while picking up Brandon, that enormous man, muscles protruding almost artificially, looking at Brusser Lee with that expression. Not anger, but condescension. The look of someone who sees an insect and doesn't decide whether to crush it out of laziness, not respect. Damanuk called both children to the backyard. Said men didn't fight over video game controller, they would have to settle it like 2 men. Whoever took the other down kept the controller. Brandon said he wouldn't do that. Said Indra could keep the video game, that he preferred to call his mother to come get him. When he tried to pass through the door, Damanuk pushed him backward. Brandon fell sitting on the backyard concrete and looked up at that enormous man blocking the exit, arms crossed, smile at the corner of his mouth. "Aren't you the son of the great Brusser Lee, that skinny little Chinese guy who swears he has American origins?" He laughed. "Show me what you've got, Minnie Lee. Let's see if you're as good as your father." Brandon stood up. Said his father had always taught him that violence was never the answer, but before he could finish the sentence, Indra attacked him from behind, pushed him by the shoulders. Brandon fell to his knees. The impact on the concrete was sharp. His left knee hit directly and the skin tore. Brandon started to cry. Damanuk looked at the crying boy and said calmly, "The worst thing an adult can say to a child, just as I expected, weak, just like his father." Then he turned, went inside, asked his wife to call Brandon's mother. Brandon remained there on the backyard floor alone, his knee bleeding, waiting for his mother to arrive. While his son spoke, Brusser examined his knee in silence. The wound was superficial but real, a clean cut already clotting. When Brandon finished, Brusser stayed quiet for a long moment, then said, "You did the right thing, son." Nothing more. He got the first aid kit, cleaned the knee with antiseptic, applied a bandage with care and patience. He told Brandon to have dinner with his mother, that he would be back later, that he had matters to attend to. Brandon looked at him with the eyes of a child who understands more than he should. Brusser grabbed his jacket and left. Culver City had some neighborhood bars that Brusser knew by sight, not because he frequented them. He didn't drink, didn't smoke, slept at 10 p.m. when possible and woke before the sun, but because he knew the territory where he lived. He had seen Dominic at that bar on Jefferson Street more than once, always with the same group, big men, tight shirts, tall glasses of beer, laughter that took over the environment as if the space belonged to them. Brusser entered. The bar smelled of stale beer and fried food. A jukebox played something no one there was really listening to. Dominic was where Brusser expected him, sitting at the counter in the back, two equally bulky friends to his right, glass in hand, posture of someone with nothing to fear in the world. Brusser approached him. Stopped 2 steps over, 140 pounds, 63 kilograms, a simple dark shirt, black pants, the expression of someone who had finished making a decision before leaving home. Dominic saw him through the mirror behind the counter before turning around and smiling. It was exactly the smile of someone who had been waiting, who had provoked a father and knew the father would come. "Busy day," Brusser said. "How many 7-year-old children did you terrorize today besides my son?" Dominic spun on the stool slowly, set his glass on the counter, stood up. The difference was almost comical to anyone who knew nothing about what they were looking at. Dominic had over 60 pounds on Bruce and a full head of height. His two friends watched with that expression of someone who already knows how this ends. "I'm raising my son to be a man," Dominic said. "If you're not doing the same with yours, that's not my problem." Bruce looked at him for a second, then said, his voice in the same calm tone as always, "Work out every day, terrorize 7-year-olds, and still your brain couldn't grow beyond a pea. Great example you're setting for your son. Stay away from mine, or you'll regret it in a way no gym will fix." He turned his back, and that's when Dominic decided it was the right moment. The 220-pound man raised his arm, his huge hand open, and placed it firmly on Bruce Lee's right shoulder. What happened next lasted less than 2 seconds, but I'll explain exactly what happened, because this is where most people don't understand. When Dominic placed his hand on Bruce's shoulder, he made a fundamental technical error and paid for it in real time. Bruce rotated to the left in a fraction of a second, a hip rotation that wasn't defense but anticipation. Dominic's hand, which had landed to hold, found the emptiness of the shoulder that had moved. And in that microsecond of imbalance, Bruce captured the man's wrist with both hands. What Bruce applied has a technical name in Jeet Kune and close contact fighting traditions: pulse control with joint rotation, derived from Wing Chun principles and refined by Bruce over years of study. The mechanics are simple but brutally efficient. The human wrist, when rotated beyond a certain angle, specifically when the radius and ulna are forced into opposition beyond their natural range, sends a pain signal so immediate and total to the nervous system that the entire body collapses before the brain processes what happened. It doesn't require brute force, it's geometry applied to the human body. Bruce applied precisely that angle with both hands, with his hip weight behind the movement, not his arms. Dominic, 220 pounds of muscle built through years of gym work and underground fights, began to descend. He didn't fall, he descended as if his own body weight obeyed those small hands. His knee touched the floor first, then the other knee, and he screamed. It wasn't a small sound. It was the kind of involuntary cry that escapes before shame has a chance to block it, the scream of someone in real pain with no choice. The bar went silent. Bruce held on, didn't release. Maintained the wrist angle, eyes fixed on Dominic below him. "You're not a man, Dominic. Why are you crying like that?" Dominic tried not to make noise. He failed. Bruce let go. The man collapsed sideways on the floor, his free hand immediately going to his wrist. He lay there looking up. Bruce stood above him, spoke slowly. "I'm not in favor of these words, much less violence. But if you touch my son again, what you felt now won't be 1% of what comes. And think about how you're raising Andrew. He's a child. He should be playing, not watching a man break another man's legs in a ring." He turned his back and walked out the same door he had entered. If you're enjoying this story, hit the like button now. This simple gesture helps the channel tremendously to keep bringing stories like this one. And it goes nowhere, because what happens to Dominic after that night is the most surprising part of everything. And before I continue, let me tell you something quickly. Those who follow the channel know that I released the ebook, The Secret Code of Bruce Lee, which dives into the real philosophies, the training, the diet, and the mental discipline that made him a legend. The feedback from those who have read it has been so overwhelming, so many reports from people saying it changed how they face their daily lives, that as a gesture of gratitude, I decided to make a second ebook available for free, The 5 Secret Rules of Bruce Lee. It's not for sale anywhere. Those who already have the main one received it as an exclusive bonus, but for channel subscribers, I've placed the access link in the video description. Just click, fill in your name and email, confirm, and the ebook arrives directly to you, free, complete, immediate. Go there now, keep it open in another tab, and come back here, because the story isn't over yet. The bar stayed quiet for a while after Bruce left. Dominic's 2 friends looked at him on the floor. No one said anything. No one bent down to help, perhaps because they didn't know how, perhaps because the scene they just witnessed didn't fit any world model they knew. Dominic got up alone, left. He didn't go straight home, sat in his car for a while. His wrist throbbed. Other parts of him hurt too, his knee on the concrete, his dignity, something deeper that he wouldn't have had words for at that moment. He didn't understand how Bruce had only touched his wrist, just his wrist. He arrived home when his wife and Andrew were already asleep. He didn't go to bed, went to the backyard, that same backyard where he had pushed a 7-year-old boy hours earlier, and sat on a garden chair with a beer can he didn't open. And there, in that silent early morning in Culver City, Dominic did something he hadn't done in years. He stayed quiet with himself. Memories don't ask permission when they finally enter. They arrive in whatever order they choose. He was 10 when his father took him to his first underground fight, not as a spectator. Dominic had argued with his older brother over something small, he didn't remember what anymore, and his father had seen it and said it was time to settle it properly, put them both in the car, drove 40 minutes to a warehouse on the outskirts of Pittsburgh, and told Dominic he had to win. Dominic had won. His brother left with a broken arm. His father had slapped him on the back that night as if it were praise. He grew up thinking that was what it meant to be strong. Grew up thinking that a father who humiliates, who demands, who doesn't embrace, was preparing his son for the world. Grew up repeating that logic in everything he did, in the gym, in the fights, in how he treated Andrew. And he sat in the backyard, remembering the times he'd cried in secret, face in his pillow at night so he wouldn't make noise, in the shower with hot water covering the sound. Those times that didn't fit any idea of manhood he'd been taught, but that existed nonetheless. He sat there until the sky began to lighten. The next morning he woke Andrew before school, sat with his son in the kitchen. The boy looked at him with that expression of a child who doesn't know what to expect. Dominic said things would change, said there were things he'd done that weren't right, in how he treated Andrew, in how he saw the world, that he didn't want his son to grow up the way he had. It was a short conversation. Dominic, a man of few words. When it ended, Andrew looked at his father for a long second and for the first time in his life asked, "Can I give you a hug, Dad?" Dominic didn't answer. He just opened his arms. 2 weeks later, a Saturday afternoon in Culver City, Bruce Lee was at home when the doorbell rang. It was Dominic, Andrew beside him. Andrew asked to speak with Brandon first. Brandon came to the door, his knee still bandaged, wary. The big boy in front of him was the son of the man who had knocked him down. Andrew said, "I want to apologize. What my father did was wrong, and what I did was wrong too. You had the courage not to fight back, even though you could have. I don't want to lose your friendship." Brandon looked at him for a moment, then smiled the way children smile when they decide everything is okay, whole, without reservation. The two went off to play. Bruce and Dominic stayed outside, sat on the porch. Bruce brought 2 glasses of water. Dominic looked at the glass as if he'd never seen anyone offer water before. They talked for an entire afternoon. Dominic apologized, not in a performative way, but in the way of someone uncomfortable with words because he wasn't used to using them that way. He said that on that night, on the bar floor, with everyone watching, he had felt something he couldn't quite name. It wasn't the pain in his wrist, it was something else. The sensation that everything he thought he knew about strength, about what it meant to be a man, about how to treat a son, had crumbled in less than 2 seconds at the hands of someone who weighed 60 pounds less than him. "How did you do that?" he asked. "I don't understand. You barely touched me." Bruce was silent for a moment. You've spent your whole life building external resistance, he said finally. No one ever taught you that most battles are won before they begin, not by the bigger man, but by the one who understands where the other's structure is already about to give way. Dominic fell quiet. When you placed your hand on my shoulder, Bruce continued, you weren't attacking me, you were telling me you were afraid. Men who aren't afraid don't need to intimidate. I didn't use force. I used the direction your own body created when you lost balance for a second. You gave me everything I needed without realizing it. Dominic sat there, listening to that man who had brought him to his knees on a bar floor with 2 fingers, talking about fear, about strength, about what it means to raise a son. The conversation took the whole afternoon. It took more. It took months, years. Dominic never became a martial artist, but he changed the gym, changed the bar, changed the backyard. Started taking Andrew to the park, to baseball games, to the boring, simple things that 7-year-old kids love and that he'd never thought were worth his time. In 1978, 6 years after that afternoon, Dominic was interviewed by a small Los Angeles community newspaper about a youth sports program he'd helped create in the neighborhood. The journalist asked what had motivated the change. Dominic was quiet for a moment, then said, "A man showed me that I could knock down anyone I put in front of me, and that it meant nothing." That's the part of Bruce Lee's story that no one tells, not because it's less impressive than a kick or a punch, but because it requires something harder to recognize, that Bruce Lee's greatest demonstration of strength that afternoon in Culver City wasn't dropping Dominic in the bar. It was knowing when to stop. It was walking away. It was coming home, sitting on the edge of his 7-year-old son's bed, carefully cleaning a scraped knee, and saying, "You did the right thing." Jeet Kune, the combat philosophy Bruce Lee developed over his lifetime, wasn't about techniques. It was about adaptation, about using only what the situation demands, about not adding force where it isn't needed, and about recognizing that the true adversary isn't the man on the other side. It's rigidity, the armor, the weight of a history no one chose to carry, but that so many people carry anyway. Dominic had carried that for decades. Bruce didn't break Dominic that night. He gave him the first crack, the rest Dominic did himself. Bruce Lee once said, "I fear not the man who has practiced 10,000 kicks once. I fear the man who has practiced one kick 10,000 times." But there is a smaller, quieter version of that wisdom, one he never wrote in a book, one that lived in how he raised a son, in how he entered a bar on a September night, in how he walked out. A man who knows how much he can do and chooses to do only enough. That is the most dangerous man who exists, and also the hardest to become. Before I wrap up, a quick message. If you've made it this far, chances are you're the kind of person who wants to understand Bruce Lee beyond what appears on screen. For you, the ebook, The Secret Code of Bruce Lee, was made real philosophies, documented training, the diet, the mental discipline, everything that transformed a 63-kilogram man into a force that toppled what no weight could overcome. It's available on Hotmart, link in the description, and with the coupon you guarantee a direct discount. If you want to start with the free one, the link for the 5 secret rules of Bruce Lee is also in the description. Just fill out the form and receive it in your email. Now subscribe to the channel. Every week, there's a Bruce Lee story that most people have never heard. There's much more of the dragon coming your way. Until next time.